Hilchot Shabbat series with Rabbi Danny Kadar, Series 3, The Shabbat Kitchen, Part 1, Cooking and Rabbinic Safeguards.
Okay, welcome back everyone. Hope you had a nice break. And we get back tonight straight into the core, really the core of the Shabbat, because the first two Shiurim which we had a few weeks ago, we discussed the positive aspect of Shabbat. If you remember, the very first lecture we discussed the difference between Zachor and Shamor. There is the positive element of Shabbat, the doing, and to that effect we talked about Kiddush, Havdalah, the meals on Shabbat, lighting the candles, the preparation for Shabbat afternoon, what you can, what you can't do, and so on and so forth. That's all part of the Zachar, part of the positive, what a person is asked to positively go and do. And what we're going to be doing now, the next few weeks, so we have now, just to remind you, for the next 4 weeks, we're going to have consecutively 4 Shiurim over the next 4 Tuesday nights, tonight being the first one. And so, tonight we're going to get into one of the biggest melachot, one of the biggest concepts in the whole of Shabbat, that of Bishul. As you see in the program, tonight we're going to be discussing in depth the intricacies, Bezrat Hashem, of Bishul, of cooking. Okay? So, the 39 melachot we know of Shabbat are extrapolated from the Mishkan. Okay? When HaKadosh Baruch Hu commands the Bnei Yisrael to build the Mishkan, He tells them all the details of how to build the Mishkan. He gathers together the entire Jewish people and tells them exactly how to build the Mishkan. But He then says, Sheshet Yamim te'aseh melacha, you must do this for 6 days, but u'bayom ha'shevi'im, on the 7th day you must stop. And from this the Hachamim learned that whatever actions took place in the Mishkan, that's the blueprint of the forbidden activities on Shabbat. Because the Torah talks about Shabbat in many places, as we said in the first lecture. Torah talks about Shabbat in many places. But all the Torah says is don't do melacha. Lo ta'aseh kol melacha. Okay? Only 2 things apart from that does the Torah specify. Number 1 is carrying on Shabbat, and number 2 is lighting a fire. Okay? Everything else, Torah just says don't do work. Now what's work? What's work for you may not be work for me. And what's work for me isn't work for you. Right? So, how are we meant to know what melacha is? So from this the Gemara learned that the melacha, the forbidden type of work on Shabbat, is melacha which took place in the Mishkan. Whatever took place in the Mishkan is what's forbidden for a person to do on Shabbat. And there are, Chachamim learned from the Mishkan, 39 forbidden forms of melacha. And some of them are unpractical today, so they're very, very detailed, very intricate, with the actual construction of the Mishkan, and in types of things which have no longer relevant because of the industrial process, right? Many melachot aren't so applicable today. But there are still some major ones, such as Bishul. That's what we're going to be talking about tonight, the melacha of Bishul, cooking. What was the cooking in the Mishkan? Why did they have cooking when they constructed the tabernacle? So, in order to create the roofs of the Mishkan, there were a number of layers as the roofs of the Mishkan. Okay? They actually had 3 layers for the Mishkan. Some say 4, at least 3. And the bottom layer was made out of different material, and that had to be dyed. And in order to create that dye, you had to go through a whole process, and you had to create this paste-like substance, which was then boiled, okay, and created into a dye to dye the lower roof of the Mishkan. That's what Bishul was done in the Mishkan. There's also Bishul apart from that later on, but that's the main idea of Bishul in the Mishkan. In order to create the dyes, to dye the lowest roof of the Mishkan, they had to create these dyes by boiling them and then going and dyeing the bottom layer. And therefore, the essence of the melacha, the essence of the work, of the activity of Bishul, which is forbidden on Shabbat, is to take something and change its essence using fire. Okay? And this isn't limited to food, although we'll be discussing edibles tonight, because that's most practical for us. But as I've just shown you, bishul can also apply not just to edibles, also to inedibles as well, right? The dyes are inedibles, nonetheless there's still a process of bishul, still a process of cooking. And that's important to understand that bishul doesn't just mean cooking food. A person who heats something up, takes metal, makes it red hot, that is bishul, that's cooking. You're changing you're softening it, you're changing its essence. That's a typical form of bishul. But we're going to focus on bishul using examples of food and the principles of bishul when it comes to the kitchen and various things which a person needs to be aware of in the kitchen. The most important thing in bishul which we need to remember is that there has to be details, and you have to know what does cooking mean. Cooking by a fire, but what temperature does there have to be? Okay, if a person has the fireplace and he puts a few meters away from it, he puts some food there and it heats up, is that bishul? What's the geder? What's the exact definition of bishul? So the Gemara tells us, this is the halakha, is that the exact definition of bishul is yad soledet bo, which means hand is scalded when you touch it. Okay, that's the temperature of yad soledet bo. Your hand is scalded. Anything less than that, there's no problem at all. But what temperature is that your hand is scalded by? So there's different opinions, but the consensus in the poskim, and this is what we take on, is that 45 degrees Celsius is yad soledet bo. Which means, if I have something, I have a fireplace, and I have food, which is far enough from the fireplace that it will not reach 45 degrees, however long it stays there, that's totally fine. Even if it warms up, gets even quite hot, but it doesn't reach the temperature of yad soledet bo, your hand is scalded by it, that's totally fine. Once, however, it has the opportunity, has the possibility of reaching 45 degrees and above, okay, that then falls under bishul, and that is prohibited. So whenever you're thinking about bishul, and by the way, this also applies to kashrut as well. Yeah, this is, I won't go into the details now, but this is why when a person's washing up and mixes things up, you should always ask a question. But very often, if you're washing up and you're not wearing gloves, then it's highly unlikely the temperature of the water is going to be yad soledet bo, because your hands will be burnt then, right? And therefore, if things get mixed up in the sink, then if you're not wearing gloves, it's not obviously the temperature of the water isn't so hot. There normally won't be a problem of kashrut, okay? Because kashrut has to be hot in order to transfer, right? But we won't go into that now. In any case, so for bishul, it has to be a minimum of 45 degrees in order to be a problem and something forbidden on Shabbat. Now, what's crucial to understand when we talk about bishul is that bishul, you think about bishul, you're thinking of fire. You're thinking of taking a food, putting it in a pot, putting it on the stove, and cooking it. And that is the classical bishul. However, the misconception with bishul is that you don't need to have fire in order to transgress this prohibition. Even if a person takes something and which is a derivative of a fire, okay, what does that mean, a derivative of a fire? That means it's been heated up by the flame. So a typical example is a pot of soup, okay? So pot of soup, whilst it's on the stove, okay, the flame's there, it's fire, that's obviously bishul there. But let's say this pot is now fully cooked, okay? And now you take this pot off the stove, and it's off. The fire is off now. The fire's gone off. It's on a timer. It's gone off now. There's no more fire involved here. As long as the pot is still yad soledet bo, it can do bishul. Which means you take the pot off the stove. As I said, the fire is gone. There's no more fire, but the pot is still very hot, of course. The actual pot, and you then go and take something very easy to cook, like an egg. You put the egg on the side of the pot. That's equally forbidden. That's like cooking by fire. This is an explicit Mishnah. Okay, and the Mishnah actually talks about an egg. Right? This is an explicit Mishnah that it's not unique to fire. Even a derivative of fire, that's called toldot hachama. Tolda is a derivative, an offspring. Toldot ha'esh, I mean. Toldot is a derivative, an offspring of the fire. That is equally forbidden like the fire itself. And you can do bishul using that. Right? It's important to understand. So you don't have to have fire in order to do bishul. As long as something is, again, the crucial temperature of 45 degrees, yad soledet ba, then you can't put raw food next to it, because that will begin the cooking process. If it's gone down in temperature to less than 45 degrees, then that's fine. So, you take the pot of soup off the fire, and you then want to put an onion in it, let's say, before serving the family, and the pot is still piping hot. That's forbidden from the Torah, right? Why? Because it's the derivative of the fire. It's called the Kli Rishon. It's important to understand this terminology. It's called the Kli Rishon. It's the first Kli. It's the actual Kli upon where the fire was, upon where the food was cooked. That's a Kli Rishon, and that's forbidden by the Torah to cook in. Similarly, an oven. This can happen. An oven which has gone off. So it's no longer on. It's got a timer, no longer on. Or you switched it off just before Shabbat. Okay? But it's still extremely hot. And it's still yad soledet bo. It's still 45 degrees. You can't put food in there although there's no flame, there's no fire. It doesn't matter. The actual oven, even after the fire has gone out, is a kli rishon. It's the first kli. It's the derivative of the fire. It's where the food was cooked, and that's still subject to bishul, and the person will transgress an isur doraita, a biblical prohibition, if he cooks something in there. That's important to remember. I won't go into this in too much detail for now, but just as something to think about. What's the status of a microwave? Okay, because a microwave doesn't use fire, but nonetheless you can cook in it. So do we view that as perhaps an extension of fire and therefore it's forbidden, or do we not? Okay, now of course, leaving aside the electrical issues, not going into them, let's say using a timer. So it comes on and goes off with a timer. Can you use it? Right, so there's no electrical issues involved. I'm asking from a purely bishul perspective. Is there a problem? Because there's no fire there. Yeah? It's radiation. Nonetheless, we won't go into the different, there's a big debate about it, but the final halakha is that, of course, we don't use a microwave on Shabbat, and it could even be a biblical prohibition, although it may also be a rabbinic prohibition. But it's important to understand, even though there's no fire involved, there's still a problem there. What would you say with regards to cooking in the sun? Okay, so it's a very hot summer's day. Okay, we had a few of these in the summer, and Shabbat afternoon, we had a few beautiful Shabbatot. You take out an egg, very easy to cook, and you take out a frying pan, and you leave it in the sun. Is that fine to do, or is that asur? What would you say? Any suggestions?
So,
no, it's fine. Okay,
Fine.
it's fine.
no,
So you took out the frying pan. Took out the frying pan from the kitchen. So, even if it gets 45 degrees, it's fine to cook in the sun. Why? Because, like we said, the essence of bishul is using fire to cook, to change in substance. Fire, although today we know that the sun is a ball of fire, true, but I'm not going to go into that now. Okay, but the sun is not the same as the fire which we talk about when we think of fire. Okay, in physics it may be fire, it's not the point. Okay, and therefore to cook in the sun is totally fine. You can take out the frying pan and you can crack your egg on the frying pan out in the sun and eat it. Lechatchila, no problem at all. However, there's a very interesting paradox which we find, and that is, even though you're allowed to cook in the sun itself, in the toldot hachama, in the derivative of the sun, you're not allowed to cook. What does that mean, derivative of the sun? That means a car, for example. A car gets very hot in the sun. Can I crack my egg on the car? Or let's say I've left a frying pan outside in the sun, and now I see it outside, I take my egg and I go and crack the egg on it. That, very interestingly, and it's paradoxical, that you're not allowed to do. The sun itself, directly in the sun, you are allowed to cook. But in something which is heated by the sun, you can't cook in that thing. Why is that? Very simple. This is a rabbinic prohibition. It's not forbidden by the Torah. It's forbidden by the Hachamim. They were concerned because of Mar'it ha'ayin. Because if the onlooker thinks you've got a boiling hot frying pan here, it's obviously been on the fire. And if it's coming from the fire, then the fire, that's a Kli Rishon. Important to remember the terminology here. It's a Kli Rishon. It's been heated by the fire, it looks like. And therefore, when you crack your egg in this frying pan, you are using a kli rishon, you're using something which has been heated by the fire in order to cook an egg. And that's forbidden. Although you know that it's been heated by the sun, but the onlooker may not know that. When you're cooking directly in the sun, that's fine, because everyone can see you cooking in the sun. And I'm talking about the frying pan is cold. You take out the frying pan, and you take out the egg, and you crack the egg on the frying pan, it's totally fine. If, however, the frying pan's been outside already, and it's already reached the hot temperature, and the egg is being cooked by the heat of the frying pan, not by the heat of the sun, then that's a sore. That's very strange if you think about it, because the sun itself is fine, but something which is heated by the sun, which is further off, that's prohibited.
So
Okay?
You'd have to put it on something.
No, you take out the frying pan from your kitchen. A cold frying pan.
You just said you can't because the frying pan.
You can't use a frying pan which has been left out in the sun.
Oh, but you'd have to take. Okay.
Yeah, because if you're using a frying pan which has been left out in the sun, what's heating the egg? The heat of the frying pan. And the heat of the frying pan, that's a derivative of the sun. As opposed to taking out, or even in your hand or in a cup, something like that, taking something out, the sun directly is cooking the egg. That's fine. Okay? And it's important to remember, even when you're not allowed, it's only forbidden rabbinically. It's not like we talked about Toldot HaEsh, derivative of the fire, that's forbidden by the Torah itself.
But the sun is not treated as a source of fire.
No, that's why I said before. Even though from the scientific perspective it's a ball of fire, nonetheless it's still not the fire which we talk about. Yeah, and therefore it wasn't extended to that. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so that's important to remember always that Chama talks about using a magnifying glass to heat water to concentrate the rays of the sun on the water, and that's fine, he says, because what you're doing is you're using the magnifying glass to concentrate the rays of the sun onto the water. So it's the sun's rays itself which is cooking the water, which is boiling the water. That's fine. Okay, so remember, whenever using the sun directly, that's totally fine to heat something up, even if it reaches far more than Yad Soleded Bob in the temperature 45 degrees. Only when you're cooking something using the heat of something which has been heated by the sun, then that's a problem.
What about solar panels?
We're going to talk about that in a second. That is exactly the next question.
And
the
issue between changing from liquid to solid, there's no issue?
What's the problem with that? No problem at all? No? No problem at all. Totally fine. Okay? Now, the next question we talk about is a dud shemesh. Okay? Dud shemesh, a solar heating boiler. Okay? Boiler heated by the sun. So are you allowed to use that on Shabbat or not? Okay? Now, Chama Vadia has a very long teshuvah about this, very long response about this, and the final halakha is that it's fine. Similarly, the other poskim say the same. You are allowed to use a dud shemesh on Shabbat, provided there's no electricity involved. Okay? If it's an electric one, then of course there's a problem. If by you turning the tap on, the electricity comes on, then of course that's forbidden. But one which is purely manual, okay, that's fine to use on Shabbat. Which means, you switch the tap on, hot water comes out, and automatically, what happens? Cold water pours into the boiler. And that's being mixed with hot water. How is that hot water hot? From the no, not from the sun itself, from the boiler. So seemingly it should be a problem, because you are causing, by you switching the tap on. Think about it. You switching the tap on, hot water is coming out. Now that water has to be replenished. So cold water pours in. That cold water is now being heated up by what? By the hot water inside. That hot water is a derivative of the sun. That's been heated up by the sun itself. That's a derivative of the sun. It's not the sun itself. The cold water which is coming into the boiler isn't being heated up by the sun. That would be fine. It's being heated up by the water within the boiler. That's a problem. Nonetheless, it's mutar. I won't go into all the reasons, but very simple is that it's a grama. A grama means it's an indirect consequence, and it's a sudra banan, it's rabbinic prohibition, it's permissible. Similarly, the second reason Rabbi writes is a psik reisha, which you're not intending to do. You want to open the tap and inevitably it comes on. I won't go into all the reasoning, but the halakha is that you are allowed to use a manual dud shemesh on Shabbat, and this is very common in Israel. Yeah, it's very common in Israel. And And we ourselves, when we lived in Israel, we actually used the shemesh on Shabbat. It's totally fine to use on Shabbat. Okay? Now, we talked just now about the Kli Rishon. And we explained the Kli Rishon is, the definition of Kli Rishon is something which has been cooked, which has been heated up using fire. And that's asur. We said that's as forbidden as is cooking in fire itself. Kli Sheni. What's a Kli Sheni first? A Kli Sheni is when you transfer something from a Kli Rishon into another vessel. So, you have, let's take a pot of soup again. You have soup which was boiled on the fire, on the stove. So the pot of soup is a Kli Rishon. And like we said, even if you take it off the fire, you put something next to it, that's strictly forbidden. But then I go and pour out from the pot into a bowl. That bowl now becomes Kli Sheni, because it's removed twice from the fire. Yeah? It's removed twice from the fire. The pot itself has been taken off the fire, that's a Kli Rishon. And you've taken out and moved into another bowl, that's now a Kli Sheni. It's a second one. Black and white in the Gemara, that Kli Sheni eno mevashel. There's no bishul with the Kli Sheni. Which means...
Even kalel bashal?
One second. Which means that once you have taken out something from the Kli Rishon, you've transferred it once, you can put something raw in it, even if the temperature of the Kli Sheni is over Yad Soledet Ba. If it's under Yad Soledet Ba, I don't need to come onto a Kli Sheni. A Kli Rishon would be fine. Remember, there's no bishul if something is less than Yad Soletet Ba, less than 45 degrees. So a Kli Rishon, a pot of soup which is cooled down to 45 degrees or less, right? You can put a raw food into it, no problem at all. Here, a Kli Sheni, even if it's above 45 degrees, it's still permissible to put food into it, even if it's raw. And the logic is that part of the bishul process, part of the cooking process, is helped by the walls of the pot upon which the fire exposed itself to. And therefore the actual pot itself, the Kli Rishon, the first pot which was on the fire, there as long as it's over Yad Soledet Ba, it's a problem. However, once it's been transferred to a Kli Sheni, where the actual walls of the pot weren't part of the cooking process, that's fine to put raw food in, even if it's over Yad Soledet Ba, it's a Kli Sheni.
What's the status?
One second, we'll take questions. We'll come to that. Okay? So that's important to remember. Black and white, Kli Sheni doesn't cook. Nonetheless, as I'm sure many of you have eaten out, you will know, you will see people, what they'll do is they'll pour from the pot into another pot and then into a further one. Why are they doing this? We just said, in a clear halacha, Kli Sheni eno mevashel, it doesn't cook. So there are two reasons for this. Reason number one is that there is an opinion, based on Tosfot, who's explaining the Gemara, one way to explain the Gemara, is that there's a problem of mechazei kim vashel. That means it looks to the onlooker like a cooking. Even though a Kli Sheni from the Torah doesn't cook, and that's black and white, that's definitely going to stay. Kli Sheni from the Torah's perspective is fine to cook in. You can put a raw carrot, you can put a raw potato, a raw onion into a bowl of soup, which has been poured in from the pot of soup. That's fine from the Torah. But for the onlooker, if it's a Kli Sheni, it's only been once removed from the fire, okay, it looks a bit like cooking, and therefore rabbinically, it's better not to, prohibit it from doing so. That's one reason given. The second reason given is an important one, and that is, even though we just said that Kli Sheni doesn't cook, the Gemara, the Mishnah gives some very specific types of foods which are so easy to cook, which are so tender and soft, that they can be cooked even in a Kli Sheni. Even in a Kli Sheni. And those are, for example, the Mishnah gives an example of salted herring, for something like that. Something which is very soft and tender. That can be even in a Kli Sheni. Okay? That can cook even in a Kli Sheni. And this second reasoning understands that today we don't really know the difference between the types of food which can be easily cooked and those which can't be easily cooked. And therefore a blanket prohibition, everything we don't put in a Kli Sheni. That's what Ashkenazim hold. They hold of both these reasons. Number one, there's a problem that for the onlooker, kli sheni, it looks like someone's cooking. And secondly, there are a limited amount of foods which are forbidden in a kli sheni. And since we don't know exactly which types of foods are and aren't, therefore we'll forbid everything. Everything cannot be put in a kli sheni. Okay? And that's the halakha for the Ashkenazim, that they will not put something in a kli sheni. Which means, you take the pot off the stove, that's a kli rishon. You pour that into another pot, into another bowl, that's a kli sheni. You can't go and put a raw onion or a raw carrot into that for the Ashkenazim. Because of two reasons we've just explained. Because perhaps, number one, the carrot is a type of fruit which is very easy to be cooked. And secondly, is that for the onlooker, it may look like you're cooking like it's a kli rishon because it's still very hot. Okay? However, we Sfaradim, we're not concerned with these two reasons. Apart from salted herring. Okay, so that we can't. Okay, we can't put herring in the kli sheni. Okay? And other very limited types of foods, okay, such as an egg is written as something which is very tender that you can't even put in a kli sheni, and some also say lemon as well. It's sharp, it's very easy to be cooked. But otherwise, apart from that, we don't make up our own. We're not concerned to say that everything is asur in a kli sheni, and basically everything can be put in a kli sheni on Shabbat for us Faradim. Now what we need to do now is talk about making tea and coffee. Okay? Come to you, don't worry. Don't forget that either. It's coming. So now, let's talk about tea. So, think of a tea bag or tea leaves, something like that. How would you make tea on Shabbat? So for Ashkenazim, we've just said, they suspect, number one, that the tea leaves are easy to be cooked. And secondly, it looks like cooking, therefore they wouldn't even put in a kli sheni. What does that mean in practice? The urn is itself a kli rishon, because the element, that's the fire, and the whole urn is considered as the kli rishon, as the pot on the fire. So as soon as you pour out from the urn into a cup, that cup now becomes a kli sheni. Okay? So for the Ashkenazim, they can't put tea leaves in that. What you need to do is pour that into a second kli, which is now a third, it's now a kli shlishi, second cup, which is now a kli shlishi. Because the urn itself is kli rishon, the first cup is kli sheni, and the next cup is kli shlishi. So that's the second cup, but it's considered the third utensil. Then you can go and put the tea leaves, tea bag into that. What's the halakha for us? So strictly speaking, me'ikar hadim, strict halakha, Rabbi Ovadia writes, it's black and white, that you're allowed to put tea leaves, tea bags into a kli sheni, which means you can pour out from the urn into the cup. That cup is now a kli sheni. You can now go and put your tea leaves into it. What you definitely cannot do though is pour from the urn into the cup with the tea leaves in. Why? Because that's pouring out from a kli rishon. Pouring out from a kli rishon, that's got a similar status to a kli rishon itself. Do you understand that? Right? So pouring out from the kli rishon itself has a similar status to the kli rishon. That you can't do. So you cannot pour directly out from the urn into the cup, because what you're doing there is you are pouring from a kli rishon onto the tea leaves. However, once the water has landed in the cup, that water is now a kli sheni. You can then go and put the tea leaves into that. That's fine. You get me? Right? So to pour directly with the tea leaves are in the cup, and then pour water from the urn into that, that's forbidden, because that's pouring from a kli rishon that you can't do. However, if the water has been poured into the cup, that's now a kli sheni. You can then go and put tea leaves and a tea bag into it. Nonetheless, Rabbi Ovadia does write that since some tea leaves are quite tender, okay, if a person can, it's good to use the kli shlishi. If a person can, he says, it's a good praiseworthy to be machmir, to be stringent. But those who don't make their teas like that, there's nothing, don't have to object as long as, again, I emphasize, as long as they don't have the tea bag and the tea leaves in the cup when they're pouring the water from the urn. That's called irui kli rishon, that's forbidden, that's pouring from the kli rishon. But once the water's been transferred into the cup, then to go and put, strictly speaking, into that is permissible, although it's good. The person has them. It's easy for him to do so, to pour into a second cup and then put the tea leaves in. Or alternatively, what you could also do for everyone as well is once you've poured the water from the urn into the cup, you then go and pour that water in the cup into another cup, and in that cup there are the tea leaves already. That's also fine as well. Okay, that's the kula.
Is the Danish high machmir?
Yes, yeah, others are machmir 100%. But as I said in the first shiur, we're taking the psakim of Chama Ovadia here. That's the what we're following. Okay, and so that's that we should be aware of now. This is only with tea leaves or a tea bag. Okay, tea essence, tea like
Liquid.
tea powder, these things, these types of things. That's totally fine, even in the Kli Rishon, because those are already been processed, they've already been cooked, they've already been processed. That's fine. We're talking about raw tea leaves, raw tea bags, these types of things. What about coffee, Nescafe coffee? Okay, so instant coffee, something like that. Okay, so instant coffee, you can actually pour directly out from the urn into the coffee. Okay, the reason being is very simple, is that the coffee has already been processed, it's already been cooked. Okay, and therefore it's fine to pour out from the urn into directly the coffee granules. You take your cup with the coffee granules, put it under the urn, that's fine. However, you must understand this isn't same with Turkish coffee, black coffee. That's different. That we'll talk about in a moment, in a couple of moments.
Ashkenaz also?
Ashkenaz as well, because it's already been processed. What should be the problem? Yeah. Putting milk is definitely fine for us Faradim. Putting milk into the cup, it's fine as well, right? Because once the water's been transferred into the cup's a Kli Sheni, and milk's already been pasteurized as well, so it's definitely fine putting milk into a Kli Sheni. Okay? Even for some Ashkenazim would even say it's fine because it's already been pasteurized, and therefore it's gone through the process already. And so therefore, to summarize, sorry?
There's no dyeing issue with the milk?
No. There's no dyeing with fruit or drinks. Dyeing is only with,
According to the Ashkenazim, that you can put the water onto the coffee, because not bishul. What about the cup being 100% dry? Is that not a problem for them? The cup should be dry.
Cup needs to be dry. No, it doesn't need to be dry. If the water has been, if it's a second cup, for example, water should have been preheated, it's definitely fine. Okay, so let's say you're having your second coffee, that's definitely fine. If however you just washed out the cup and it's water which hasn't been pre-boiled, then some poskim on Moshe is matter that because it's the few drops. But it also says you should try to dry it out. But our poskim definitely is fine. Even for some Ashkenazim it's fine as well. But let's just stay on the point because we've got lots to cover still. So just to summarize, okay, is that clear? So we talked about the tea, how to make the tea. We talked about how to make instant coffee, and we'll talk about Turkish coffee in a moment. One final point is davar gush, it's called. And this is a very logical idea that some argue that which we say when you move something from a Kli Rishon to a Kli Sheni, it lowers its status and you're allowed to cook. That's only liquids. But something which are hard solids, right, that however many bowls you transfer it, so a boiling hot potato for example. So you have a hot potato which is boiled on the stove, okay, in a pot, the pot's Kli Rishon. I then go and take the potato and put it on my plate. What would you say now, according to what we've learned tonight so far? That potato now becomes a Kli Sheni. Okay? But some argue no. Because only with liquids, when you move it, so the atoms within it are also moving. And by them moving, it loses the heat. But a solid, atoms are moving so much. And when you're moving it into the Kli Sheni, it doesn't cool it down. Therefore, it's still a problem. And this is why you'll find so much Ashkenazim, if the boiling hot kugel, for example, something like that. Yeah? So however many bowls they move it could be the third, fourth plate, they still will refrain from putting raw spices on it, or something like salt or something like that onto it. Why? Because they're still concerned it has the power to do bishul. But we Sfaradim, poskim right, very clear, we don't take this on, and there's no chumrah at all of the davar gush. So what we've said tonight applies both to liquids and to solids, that you're allowed to, once you've taken the potato out and put it onto the plate, okay, that potato now becomes a kli sheni, and you are allowed to put whatever you want onto it. Okay, let's move on now. Can I pour croutons into my soup? Okay, so I've now transferred. Let's talk without a ladle for the moment. I pour out from the pot of soup which was on the fire into a bowl, okay, and that bowl is now a kli sheni. Can I put croutons into that?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's analyze it. Let's go through this systematically. There is a principle, en bishul achar bishul, which means once something has already been cooked, it can't be cooked further. Once it's been fully cooked, it can't be cooked further. What does that mean? So let's say I have firstly, before that, we must understand the distinction between bishul and afiyah. These are two words. Bishul and afiyah. Bishul means to cook, afiyah means to bake. What's the difference between cooking and baking from a halachic perspective? Very simple. Bishul means that you cook using water. You're changing the essence of something using fire and water. Afiyah, baking, means to change the substance of something just with fire without water. So baking chalot, that's afiyah. Pot of soup, that's bishul. Can I take my challah, which has been baked, and go and put it into the pot of soup itself? You've taken the pot off the fire, okay? You've taken the pot of the fire, you've got now a pot of soup which is a clear rishon. Can I go and take the challah and put it into the pot of soup? Seemingly, en bishul achar bishul. Once something's been cooked, it can't be cooked further. And that's what some argue. Some rishonim, they say yes. Once something has already been baked, even if you cook it, it's fine. So you could take a challah, which has been baked, and then go and put it in a bowl of soup to cook it. Is it wrong with me? Yeah? Because even though they are two different types of changing substances, but once it's been fully processed, it's been baked, you can then go and put it and cook it. That's what some argue. Others say no. Even though it's been fully cooked, but doing the other type of processing is a qualitative difference. And therefore, it will be forbidden to do so. And vice versa as well. You wouldn't be able to do afiyah after bishul. So for example, you have a piece of meat which was cooked in a soup. Okay, so that piece of meat it was mevushal. That piece of meat was cooked. Can I then go take out that piece of meat by itself and go and put it directly on the hot plate, let's say? Because now you're baking, you're frying really a piece of meat. Can you see? You're not using water. When you don't use water, that's called afiyah. That's called baking. Right? So you're now taking something which was cooked in a pot and then going and baking it. Are you allowed to do that? So, it's a big debate, okay? And the Shulchan Aruch himself brings down both opinions. But the second opinion he brings down is the main one, and the second opinion holds that it's permissible. It's permissible to do bishul after afiyah or afiyah after bishul, which means, as I said, you can take challah, okay, and put it in the pot of soup if it's off the fire, okay. Even though the pot of soup is clearly shown, but the challah has been baked already; it's already been processed. Even though you're now doing a different type, you're now doing, instead of an afiyah, instead of a baking, you're doing a bishul, you're doing a cooking. Nonetheless, it's fine, and vice versa as well. Okay? The Ashkenazim hold you can't. Ashkenazim hold even in a kli sheni you're not allowed to. You have to use a kli shlishi. And they actually say that here's even worse than a regular kli sheni. Why? Because, let's throw this in very quickly, because since it's already been baked or cooked, it's now more tender. And therefore it can even be cooked in a kli sheni for sure. Therefore you definitely have to use a kli shlishi. Yeah? That's what they hold. And therefore, but for us, mi'ikar hadin. Once something has been baked, it's allowed to be cooked. When something's been cooked, it's allowed to be baked. Okay, you can do the opposites to each other. Okay? Again, because this is a big mahloket, right? The provider does write himself, If a person can be stringent, it's good to, but Meikar Hadin, we should know that once something has been fully baked, once something has been fully cooked, you're allowed to do the opposite type of processing to it. You are allowed to do that. Therefore, coming back to the question we began with croutons in the soup. Can you put croutons in the soup? Okay? So let's think about it. You have the pot, you took the pot off the stove. You've now taken from the pot into your bowl. That bowl is now, what's the bowl? It's a kli sheni. Okay? Can you put the croutons in? Let's think about it. The croutons have been baked. Right? You're putting it in soup. Soup it's water. You're going to do bishul. So you're doing bishul after something has been baked. That's fine for us. Okay? That's fine for us. Are you going to tell me that Ashkenazim hold you have to use a kli shlishi? Okay? And therefore they're going to have to put it into a further bowl? That's true. However, if a ladle has been used to transfer the liquid from the pot of soup to the bowl, if a ladle has been used and that ladle acts as an intervention, as another kli, and therefore the bowl is considered kli shlishi. And therefore, even for them, if a ladle has been used, you can put croutons in. The only time for Ashkenazim you're going to have to pour from the pot into a bowl, into a further bowl, is if you're pouring directly out. If you're using a ladle though, then strictly speaking you wouldn't need it. You will still find some still pouring into a further bowl because they just want to make sure they're covered completely, just in case they, for whatever reason. Yeah, but, I mean, even for Ashkenazim it's fine. But for us, as we said, strictly speaking, for us, a kli, once something has been cooked, it's allowed to be baked, and vice versa. When something's been baked, it's allowed to be cooked because it's been fully processed already. Therefore, coming back to Turkish coffee, so I'll come back to that. Turkish coffee, how would you make that on Shabbat? So Turkish coffee, black coffee, has already been roasted. Okay, what's roasting? Roasting is like baking. It's dry heat. Yeah, there's no water involved there, and therefore, for us, say the poskim, strictly speaking, you can pour directly from the urn onto the black coffee. In practice, it's not advised. Rabbi himself writes this, because not always have all the granules been roasted. Okay, and therefore you may be actually cooking something for the first time. And therefore, even with black Turkish coffee, a person should preferably use a kli sheni. Okay? So according to what we've learned, if you have barbecued meat which is on the barbecue, can you put that into a pot of soup? You've taken the pot of soup, put it on the Shabbat table now, you have meat, and you want now meat which is barbecued, can you go and put that meat into the pot itself? According to what we've learned, you can, strictly speaking. Why? Because even though it's been barbecued, it's afiyah, okay? It's a type of afiyah, it's tzli, it's roasted, but it's basically afiyah, okay? And you're putting it into a pot, now be sure, it's also still fine to do. Okay? Okay. Should we just, I just want to say one point and then I'll summarize this all. And one more point and I'll summarize this. Can you make toast on Shabbat? Okay? Toast on Shabbat. So you have challah already, baked for Shabbat. And you want to now go and put it on the hot plate. Okay? And toast it. What would you say? Are you allowed to do that or not? What's the problem? Yeah?
Didn't it come with tannin?
No, it's not with fruits. Not with fruits.
You are cooking it further.
No, it's fully cooked. It's baked.
People always keep up the colour.
It's baked.
That being direct
So-
contact. So you should be able to do it.
You are allowed to do it. You are allowed to do it, okay? You are allowed to make toast on Shabbat. Of course, not using it. Huh?
Which clay?
No, on the hot plate. We're going to talk about hot plates tonight in the next Shiur. Okay, the status of hot plates. But presuming you are allowed to use a hot plate on Shabbat, which is what we will conclude you are allowed to, okay, then you can put the challah directly on it. Or put the challah on top of the urn. Okay, even if that toasts it, makes it, dark, that's fine. It's fine to do on Shabbat. It's totally fine. So to summarize what we've said so far, and then we'll do a couple more points. To summarize what we've said so far. So, number one we've said is that Bishul is using fire. Okay, but fire always means Yad Soledet Bo. Okay, minimum of 45 degrees. It doesn't have to be fire itself. Anything which has been heated directly by fire is called a kli rishon, and that can do bishul, that can do cooking, as long as it's 45 degrees and above. Cooking in the sun itself, directly by the rays of the sun, is permissible, but cooking in something which has been heated by the sun is not permissible. Okay? A kli sheni, we said, for us Faradim, strictly speaking, is fine. Okay, there are certain foods a person should be aware of, not to, because it's small fish, lemon, egg, and perhaps tea leaves as well. And we talked about the correct way of making tea. The correct way of making tea for us, Sfaradim, strictly speaking, is a person is allowed to pour water into a cup and then put the tea leaves in. However, it's preferable, definitely preferable, to pour that into a further cup and then put the tea leaves in. But those who don't do that, one doesn't need to object to. And we also talked about how to make instant coffee. That we said you can pour directly from the urn onto instant coffee because it's already been processed. And then we also talked about whether you can do bishul after afiyah after bishul, or are you allowed to do vice versa? And we concluded that strictly speaking, we are allowed to do so on Shabbat as Faradim. Ashkenazim on Makpid, in particular, not to do so. Now, this is an important point. This can quite be quite relevant on Friday night, especially in the winter now. Okay? The following 2 points are very relevant actually, especially in the winter. Firstly, you took a pot of soup off the fire, okay? And you now want to put it back on. You have a blech, you have a hot plate, you have, we'll talk about that all later, next week. But you want to put it back onto the fire now. Are you allowed to do so? So we've just said before, ein bishul achar bishul. Once something's been cooked, okay, it can't be cooked further. That's true, however, only with solids. Okay, that means schnitzel. The schnitzel is being cooked, been baked actually. Okay, that can be, even once it's cooled down, that can be reheated. You can put that on the platter on Shabbat, on the hot plate. You can put that in the pot of soup. If you've taken the pot of soup off, you can put the schnitzel in. It's already been baked. That's fine. However, liquids, once they've cooled down, it's forbidden to reheat them. The reason being is very simple. When you heat a solid, the primary reason why you're heating a solid is because you want to make it edible. That's the primary reason. The secondary reason, it's hot. Okay? Once it cools down, so the secondary reason is no longer there, but the primary reason is there. It's still edible. Whereas when you're heating a liquid, normally the primary reason you're heating a liquid is because you want it to be hot. There's a secondary reason, sterilization, whatever, hygiene, but the primary reason is for it to be hot. Therefore, once it's cooled down, it's subject to further bishul. So what that means is, if you have something which was hot, it was fully boiled, it's 100 degrees, yeah, but now it's cooled down, and it's 30, 40 degrees, it's prohibited to reheat it on Shabbat, to put it on a source of fire where it will reach over Yad Soledid Ba. Okay, that's what we Sfaradim hold, yeah? Is that clear? So therefore you can't, if you take a pot of soup, you serve the guests, okay? You take it off, and now it's no longer piping hot, it's forbidden to put it back onto the fire on Shabbat, onto the hot plate on Shabbat. It's going to reheat it.
What about chicken soup?
Chicken soup?
Because it's got chicken in it.
So we'll talk about that in a second. Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. So that's an important distinction between solids and liquids. Solids, there's no further bishul. Once it's been cooked, it's fine. Liquids, however, once it's cooled down, it's a problem to reheat it. What does cooled down mean? For us, cooling down means less than 45 degrees. You can no longer reheat it. Now, I've told you until now many things which we Sfaradim are lenient about and the Ashkenazim are stringent about. Now I'll tell you something where the Ashkenazim are lenient, more lenient than we are. So they hold as long as something is warm, even if it's cooled down, as long as it's 20, 25 degrees, as long as it's still warm and you can see it's once been reheated, although it's no longer hot, they hold you are allowed to reheat that. So for them they could take the pot off, leave it on the Shabbat table, serve all the guests, for 10, 15, 20 minutes, it cools down, but it's still warm, and then go and put it back on the hot plate. Okay?
Liquid or solid?
Sorry? A liquid even for Ashkenazim.
Yeah.
No? Yeah, because it's still warm. Okay? For us, however, that would be asur. Once it's cooled down, less than yatzuledet bar. And I won't go into the reasons why, but that's the halacha for it. Now, stirring. Okay? This is the final point we talk about bishul, stirring. This is a very important point which I think a lot of people don't know. We said that once something's been fully cooked, it's not subject to further bishul. Okay? So, it has to be fully cooked though. If something's only been cooked 3/4, can you, and you took it off the stove before Shabbat, on Shabbat, can you put that back on? Of course not. Because by putting it back on, you're going to be completing the bishul process. Okay? Once something's been fully cooked, then you're allowed to put it back on. It's like we said, the schnitzel which has been fully cooked, it's in the fridge now before Shabbat it was cooked, you can take it out and put it on the urn, on the hot plate on Shabbat. What's called fully cooked? Okay, because you think about it, think of hamim, think of cholent. Okay? Cholent. You have, let's say, cholent which has been cooked before Shabbat and it's edible now. But, as we know, over the course of the night, it cooks further and it gets even tastier. Okay, so when do we consider it to be fully cooked? Is fully cooked when it's reached that crispy point? Or is it fully cooked when it's edible? Okay, so we must understand that fully cooked means it's edible. It's edible meaning I would eat it like this if I wanted to eat. If I wanted to eat now, I would eat now. It's not something I'd have to wait and cook more. If I wanted to eat now, I would eat it now. True. If it's on the fire for a further few hours, it's going to be tastier. That's called mitzdamek ve'afelo. That means it becomes tastier. But that's already considered fully cooked. That's already considered fully cooked. One word of caution is that if you have bones, what about if you have, let's say, chicken wings or bones? Okay? Very often what you'll have is that the dish itself will be cooked, but the bones won't be. In the sense, sometimes bones will become very soft, you can actually bite into them. Do you have to be concerned that before putting something back onto the fire, let's say you took the cholent off the fire, and it's fully edible, and everyone's enjoying it, but the bones aren't tender, they aren't soft yet. Seemingly, if you put it back onto the fire, you're now going to be causing those bones to become fully tender and fully edible. So Poskim says it depends. It depends on what your preferences are. If you are a person who eats bones, okay, then it will be forbidden to put it back on if the bones aren't fully tender. If, however, you don't eat them, then you are allowed to actually put it back on. Okay? Now, why am I telling you all of this? So let me explain. There is a principle in Bishul called Memaher Bishulo, which means Bishul isn't just when you actually go and cook something, you take something raw and put it on the fire. If you actually speed the process of the cooking, that's also exactly the same as also Bishul. So, you have food on the fire which is half cooked, and you then go and raise the temperature of the stove. Okay? The food would only have been cooked in an hour's time, but now I've made it cook in half an hour, therefore, that's forbidden, and that's forbidden by the Torah. It's called speeding up the cooking process, forbidden by the Torah. Very important application of this. Extremely important application. Friday night, you put the cholent on the fire only an hour before Shabbat. And 2 hours into Shabbat, you want to check to see if the cholent's cooked, or if the food is cooked. So you lift up the pot, the lid of the pot. Okay, you look inside and you see, this isn't cooked enough. It needs another half an hour. You can't put the lid back on. Why? Because by putting the lid back on, you are now speeding the bishul process. Once you took it off, okay, you've slowed down the process. Now, by you putting it back on, the heat is now intensified. It's focused now. You're going to be speeding up the bishul process. Therefore, you're not allowed to actually put it back on. Similarly, stirring. You're not allowed to stir, because when you stir something, again, you're speeding up. You're exposing it more to the heat. So you're not allowed to stir a pot which isn't fully cooked on Shabbat. Okay, you're not allowed to stir. And this is even if you've taken it off the fire. You've taken it off and you see, this isn't fully cooked. To actually go and stir it now is not allowed. Why? Because by stirring it, you're now going to expose it all further to the fire, and that's going to be speeding up the bishul process. Therefore, that's not permissible. Once something has been stirred, that's fine. However, what's written is that when something's actually on the fire, okay, even if it's been fully cooked, you're still not allowed to stir it all the way around. Yeah, you're not allowed to stir. There are a number of reasons given for this. One reason is because of it looks like cooking. Another reason is when you stir something on the fire, it adds a qualitative difference to it. Okay, and therefore, to stir food whilst it's on the fire is strictly forbidden. Now, when you take out with a ladle, let's think for a moment now. We'll end with this point. When you take something out with a ladle, okay, that's like a mini type of stirring. So when you stir something, what you do is, you go round. You're taking it out, it's like half a stirring. And therefore, Hachamim were concerned that may lead to actual stirring. And therefore, food which hasn't been fully cooked, you're not even allowed to take out from it. You took food off, and you've realized it's not fully cooked, you now want to go and take out something out of it, which you think is cooked. Let's say one part of it is cooked, you want to take it out. They're not allowed to do, because that's a mini stirring. That's prohibited. And some say that even extends to on the fire itself. Even if it's fully cooked, you're not allowed to actually take out and serve with it. Okay, and therefore, it's preferable when a person is serving guests, if he has a hot plate or he has a blech, he has something to put the food back on so it won't get cold. It's preferable for a person to take the pot off and serve, rather than serve on the stove itself, even if the food is fully cooked. Even if the food is fully cooked, and to stir is definitely not allowed on the fire. But to stir, but to actually even just to take out is preferable not to. It's better for a person to take off the pot, to serve, and then to put it back on. There is a final issue here, but we've gone over time, so I'll just raise it. You need to think about is what happens when a person is eating in a house where these laws aren't observed. You've been invited to a family, and they don't keep these halachot. You suspect that they may have cooked on Shabbat, or they may not be keeping these halachot. Is the person out to eat the food or not? Have a think about that. We'll discuss that next week. But we've discussed the main issues. Again, Bishul is a huge topic. Okay, if not the biggest, one of the biggest melachot, the biggest melachah in Shabbat. And we've tried to cover the major issues, and I hope you understood what we said. Happy to discuss questions afterwards. Just end off with a very brief idea on the parasha, just to think about. Very brief idea with Yitzchak and Rivka, because we find Rivka at the beginning of the parasha this week. She's very upset. She doesn't know what's going on with her. All this pain. She says, "Lama ze anochi? Why am I living?" Yeah. Ramban writes that she was questioning, she had existential questions about her life. And what does she do? She goes to seek advice. Who does she go to seek advice from? She seeks advice from Shem. Shem, grandson of Noach. Yeah. She goes to seek advice from Shem. And there's an obvious question here. Who's Rivka's husband? Yitzchak. Who's Rivka's father-in-law? Who's Rivka's father-in-law? Abraham. Why the need to go all the way to Shem? Okay, who's a distant relative, to seek advice of God, when your husband, your father-in-law, are themselves great individuals, the greatest people of the time? Why does she not, speak to her husband? Say, look at the pain I'm going through. What's this all about? No, she goes and asks Shem, and Shem gives the famous prophecy that you're going to have twins, and there's going to be a constant battle between them, rivalry between them. That's the prophecy we read about. One will be good, one will be bad. Yeah. So Rivka knows all this. Rivka now has these twins in her stomach. And she knows one thing's going to be good, one thing's going to be bad. Later on in the parasha, the main part of the parasha is what? Is the whole episode of the blessings and the curses, where Yaakov and Esav, where Yitzchak, the father, wants to give the blessings to Esav, and Rivka wants the blessings to go to Yaakov. And what does Yitzchak tell his son Esav? I want to bless you, go and prepare me the food. Rivka, overhearing this, what does she do? She goes and she tells Yaakov, dress up as Esav and get the blessings, steal the blessings from your father. And that's exactly what happens. When you're reading all of this, there's a simple question here. Why doesn't Rivka just turn around to her husband Yitzchak, have a conversation with him, and say, look, you want to bless Esav, I think we should bless Yaakov, not Esav. But none of that. You read the verses, there's like Yitzchak's thinking this, on this plan of action, and Rivka's got her plan of action. Why did they fail to actually communicate, to tell each other, and everything will be sorted out? It's a glaring blatant question here. What's going on? Why did they? What are the consequences of this whole episode? That Yaakov steals the blessings from Esav. What happens? Esav wants to kill his brother. Okay? As a result, Yaakov has to run away. 22 years. Rivka doesn't see her son, her beloved son, for a long time. Okay? What happened? So this is something the Netziv. The Netziv is Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, from Lithuania in the 19th century. If he wouldn't have said it, I wouldn't have the courage to say it. But he says it, and therefore I'm repeating what he says. He says something amazing. He says, if you look through the Torah, the relationship of Yitzchak and Rivka was a very different relationship to that of Abraham and Sarah, and Yaakov and Rachel. And in fact, they actually weren't able to communicate with each other properly. And what's his source for this? His source for this, he says, was from last week's parasha. Because if you remember, how did Yitzchak and Rivka meet each other? What was their first moment of greeting each other?
Fed from the
Yitzchak's bringing, Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, is bringing back Rivka on the camel, and she sees Yitzchak, who's meditating in the middle of prayer, and she's so taken aback by him, she falls off her camel. At that moment was instilled within her this constant fear, trepidation of her husband. And from then on, he writes, this is his words, she was never able to open up and express herself to her husband. As a result, when she has pregnancy pains, unusual ones, she doesn't go and ask her husband. She doesn't go and ask her father-in-law because she's scared they'll tell her, why pregnancy pains, of course, are a sin, for the sin of Chava. You're a righteous woman, you shouldn't be having these such abnormal pains. So she doesn't want to go and speak to her husband. She goes to Shem. Because she has to go to Shem, and Shem tells her of the prophecy of the two brothers, it's going to be one bad, one good, she can't now go back and tell Yitzchak, because then Yitzchak asks, why didn't you come and tell me in the first place? And so she keeps within her this secret. All this time, she's carrying within her this secret. I'm going to have two sons, only one going to be good, one going to be bad. And then her husband gets up to actually go and bless Esav. And she knows, she's been told by a prophecy this is wrong. She knows Esav is the wicked one. She's been told in a prophecy by Shem. But she can't go and tell Yitzchak. And so she has to create this whole story, this whole episode, this whole drama, which has all these long-term effects. And you think about it, it's something which is, as I said, it's something very, very difficult for us to talk about when we talk about our avot, our forefathers, so we always aspire and look up to. Okay? But this is something which we must learn in our own lives, the importance of communication, the importance of dialogue with each other. And how, because Yitzchak and Rivka failed to have this communication, failed to have this dialogue, how the entire episode of this week's parasha come about. If they just had the ability to talk to each other, and to actually discuss why I'm going through my pregnancy pains, why is it so difficult, why do you want to give a blessing to Esav, things would have turned out so very different. Next week, Be'ezrat Hashem, we will move on to, as the program says, we're going to move on to Shehiyah, leaving foods from before Shabbat over the course of Shabbat, returning foods onto the fire on Shabbat, and finally insulating foods on Shabbat, wrapping them up, with a towel, or these types of things, and hot plates and blechs, all of that will be covered, please God, next week, same time.